with the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney here in Washtenaw County. So what does that mean? We're a new initiative of the prosecutor's office, relatively new. I've been working for a year and a half now. And the concept is that we're going to try to build up some of the latent authority of the office to actually make a practical impact in the lives of people using kind of non-traditional means. And I'll go into more examples of what exactly that is. So just a brief introduction of myself. I'm on a Public Rights Project Fellowship. That's a source of external funding for 2 years. And then the county is considering making the position permanent moving forward. I'm coming from a civil legal services background, having worked with Lakeshore Legal Aid in Detroit for 4 years before coming to this position, doing kind of affirmative systemic advocacy on behalf of low-income people and families. And then before that, I was in Chicago for a couple of years after graduating from Harvard Law School. And then before that, had instruction, and I was actually with Habitat for Humanity for 6 years after the University of Michigan. So kind of a working class background, some practical life experience in construction and different kind of work like that. Excuse me. So the Economic Justice Unit, the need that the prosecutor's office saw to create this is basically that the status quo is economic injustice. And so there's a gap that we can try to fill at the local level. So 2 examples of that and 2 of our focus areas are workers' rights and a specific flavor that is wage theft, which is a massive problem. So this number is just for minimum wage violations alone, $429 million in a single year. And so that across the entire nation is more than the total value of all property crimes, every robbery. Yep.
Todd, one moment.
Yep.
Would you be able to make those slides any bigger? I'm not sure if that's possible.
Are you seeing a small?
Yeah, it looks pretty small from our end.
Is that bigger?
Oh, yes, that was bigger.
Okay. I have no idea. It's the exact same as it was before. I just kind of.
It is now. Now, I think if you just kept it open and non-presenter mode, we might be able to see it better.
Okay. So you can see this, okay?
No, that's really small.
Interesting.
Sorry about that, Todd.
No, I am sorry.
Yeah,
it's 3 odd years into a pandemic. Okay.
That's still pretty small. Smaller still.
We're going backwards. Okay. Does that work?
Yeah, this is actually a lot better, I think.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out, Sheila. Appreciate it.
Yep. Just no way to do it. Okay.
The way you had it just before you went back into presenter mode
Yep.
was readable. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So wage theft. Wage theft just is a massive problem. So basically, these are just a single flavor of wage theft, of worker rights issues, of wage theft, minimum wage violations. And so it is that large of an issue in the US. And then this is pre-pandemic numbers. I'll note that. And so it's possible that the minimum wage issue itself is less than it used to be, but still a massive issue. And that's just the one particular flavor. So wage theft can be many different things. It could be shaving hours. It could be refusing to pay overtime. A lot of different improper deductions, tip theft, just a lot of different ways that wage theft can occur. And then consumer fraud being a massive problem, and just the scope of harm and the scope of losses to consumer fraud. So we do have prosecutorial authority to actually advocate for economic justice. So it's just basically no local prosecutor has used it as far as we can tell. There's a general enabling statute that says prosecutors are empowered to appear in all cases, civil or criminal, in which the state or county may be interested. So it's an incredibly broad general authorization to act on behalf of the people, including civil, and that's been my focus. The Michigan Consumer Protection Act, again, is a civil statute, and that's generally traditionally enforced by the Attorney General. However, there's a clause in it that provides that every local prosecutor can also enforce the Michigan Consumer Protection Act. There's also public nuisance authority, basically anything that's harmful, and we can think about applying criminal laws in new ways that aren't traditional for the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system. For example, applying criminal laws in the employer-employee context when appropriate. So the Economic Justice Unit is created to actually promote economic justice, to have proactive enforcement on this. And so a lot of times with the work of the office in general, law enforcement is doing the investigation, doing the criminal investigation, and then the office is reviewing and moving forward appropriately based on that. So here we actually kind of do the investigations in-house. And so we're looking into things proactively. We do have a public-facing complaint system that I'll provide that information on later. But the basic concept is we can actively look into things and try to figure out whether there's value add to our office being involved. And then if there's not, or if there is, either way, we'll try to provide people with legal information and other resources so they can move forward in every direction that they possibly can to assert their own rights. And then the scope of work is quite broad because the authority is quite broad, but we do have some focus areas, including consumer protection, worker protection, labor trafficking. With labor trafficking, I'll note that may be commonly thought of as sex trafficking, and that's the one that tends to get prosecutions, particularly on the federal level. It's estimated that there's actually 10 times the number of labor trafficking in a general sense, forced work labor than sex trafficking. And so that can take a variety of forms. It can take on the form of debt bondage, for example, but there's a lot of different ways that there can be a coerced forced work. The county has a responsible contractor policy, which we can enforce, that basically is requiring the people with whom the county does business must follow the law, and if they don't, we can potentially have enforcement there. Housing-related scams and abuses are a particular flavor of consumer protection, tenants being consumers, and public nuisances as well. So this is a one-person operation that we're just starting up, but we're looking for the value add of local enforcement. So we've got this legal authority, and there's some gaps in what the actual enforcement in the landscape looks like in terms of federal and state enforcement, in terms of public enforcement, and there's some gaps on the private side. And so that's what we're looking for. And so an example of the federal enforcement, they may have particular thresholds for action or particular priority areas, which means that certain other areas aren't necessarily getting the federal attention. And then particularly with monetary thresholds, if the feds are only taking cases that are 6 figures or higher, with those thresholds can vary, and they're not necessarily formal, but they do exist. The harm can be extremely great to a low income person, but it's not going to meet the threshold for federal involvement. And then on the private side, access to justice issues. So where's the private bar declining cases? Where does legal services not have the resources to meet the need? So an example of this is there's a lot of mandatory arbitration agreements and mandatory class action waivers, which as a practical matter tend to preclude private attorneys from taking on a case. And so those don't bind the prosecutor's office, and we can move forward with public enforcement in those circumstances, whereas the private bar might be declining it. And so because we have both criminal and civil legal authority, we do have some natural relationships with law enforcement. and law enforcement partners. And then if something is not necessarily meeting the threshold to move forward with a criminal action, it's a different legal standard beyond a reasonable doubt as opposed to preponderance of the evidence, for example. So super certain or just 51% certain. Then we can still move forward with some kind of relief, civil enforcement. And so a lot of times due to a variety of reasons, somebody may not want to move forward with a criminal enforcement action, but they are willing to move forward with a civil enforcement action. So a couple examples of the work that we've done so far in the office. There was a local daycare, a very small business that was misclassifying its employees as independent contractors. And so they were doing this in order to shift the tax burden of employer FICA taxes, so Social Security and Medicaid taxes, which total 7.65% of payroll. And they were shifting the employer side of that to the employees. It turns to self-employment tax when the independent contractor classification is applied. And so that is, definitely straightforward. They were calling them independent contractors. You can't be an independent contractor in a daycare. It's not allowed under licensing. You have to have control of your workers. If they're independent contractors, they would themselves have to be licensed, that kind of thing. And so we were able to reach out. They agreed to change their business practice immediately, and they paid back all the workers for all that shifted tax burden for the last 3 years. So it was $16,000 for 14 low-income workers. And these were primarily high school and college age workers. And so who were surprised at the end of the year when they owed taxes and had to then repay several $100s, I think, per year. A couple of them might have been more than that even. So an example of the kind of broad authority that we have is Delta Tau Delta litigation. That was a fraternity at Eastern Michigan University. And so this falls under the general public nuisance authority of the office. So it's not squarely an economic justice, but it's an affirmative civil litigation that we can do proactively to address an issue. The issue here was that there was a history of sexual assaults at this fraternity, and they were all subject to either concluded or ongoing criminal cases. So I believe it was at least 15 separate sexual assaults with different alleged perpetrators at this location associated with a culture and associated with parties. And so we filed an affirmative case to shut that down and to require training and awareness type remedial measures. And we won that in court. So basically, this is presenting a danger to the public, and we can do something that is separate from and in addition to the traditional criminal process, which is always kind of backward looking. It's looking at something bad happened, and therefore we do X, Y, and Z. And this is more aimed at kind of the future and stopping the harm, and hopefully changing and being a positive actually effect for the fraternity as well. And then we're looking at the value add of local enforcement in kind of community education. So spreading Know Your Rights materials, working with community partners. We do work with a variety of community partners and collaborate. And then we do have some outreach materials and presentations, speaking events, things of that nature. And so part of this too is that we can be a local resource. I pick up the phone and I answer emails. And so we can try to connect you with somebody that we have a relationship with if you're having trouble getting connected. An example that can be the State Wage and Hour Division. I think they need an actual written complaint in order to move forward with an enforcement action. And so that's going to be an issue for some people. And so we can try to connect and try to shorten the gap there. We've got a complaint form. So the prosecutor's office website, we are taking direct information from people who want to share from their life experiences or from other people's. Frankly, we have complaints for people who aren't the directly injured party. The daycare situation actually came from a high school teacher who was like, this doesn't seem right. And then it's not a police report, it's not law enforcement. You're telling essentially me, you're telling this office, and then we can have that conversation and point you toward other resources and legal information first and foremost. And then we'll look to see if there's a role for our office to play as well. So we do have the outreach materials that I mentioned earlier. We try to do outreach proactively on a variety of medium, including social media. Prosecutor Savitt, who I just saw appear briefly, is a TikTok star, I think. I don't know if there's a particular word for TikTok celebrity.
Well, the word for what you just said is a huge exaggeration, but I do have a TikTok account.
Got it. So basically, we try to do outreach. We've got flyers, we've got written materials, we've got translated materials on our website in, I believe, 5 different languages currently, and that's the next slide. And so we're trying to provide this material in as accessible a format as possible, trying to get the word out and look and see what's going on in our community, and if there's something that we can do about it, and then sharing all the resources that we possibly can. So with that, we're working with government partners. And so this picture is of signing a memorandum of understanding with the Federal Wage and Hour Division. And that is hosted at a union hall with labor partners. And so, you know, there's potentially competitive advantages to federal or state enforcement, but there's also value add to local enforcement. We're more accessible, we're more responsive, potentially we can move quicker. And we can, again, connect with those broader resources where appropriate. So got some examples of those kind of collaborative efforts. There was a rare coins scammer who's going around to some elderly folks. And so basically, you know, selling rare coins. And then we actually weren't able to move forward with the criminal action on this. So without the Economic Justice Unit, it may not have moved forward with any enforcement action from the public. But because we existed, we were able to connect with the state attorney general, and then they were able to connect with the state of New York attorney general. So this was somebody coming from New York to Michigan. And then it was able to be enforcement from both locations. So it was kind of a one touch in Washtenaw County. It was more appropriate for the broader geographic jurisdiction. But then there was actual action taken as opposed to a declined criminal charge, and the case just kind of goes away. And then Portfolio Recovery Associates is one that we just recently took action on. There's a federal enforcement action with a federal agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they're saying that this nationwide debt buyer, debt collector portfolio recovery has been doing it illegally. And so there's actually 2015 enforcement and a 2023 enforcement against portfolio recovery. And then there's been 6,000 cases filed in Washington County in the last 11 years by portfolio recovery. So we're trying to connect that. We're trying to connect the federal enforcement action with the actual people in Washington County in the district court cases that are open and in garnishment status. So there's large issues with debt collection in terms of 70% of people not showing up to court and automatically losing. And part of that is because they don't know their legal rights. And then there's concerns about not being able to do anything if you do show up, and lots of other power imbalances and concerns about court in general. But here, there's an actual federal government agency and a federal court order saying that this person trying to collect has to do X, Y, and Z before they collect debt. Did they do X, Y, and Z? You can ask them. Here's the order. Boom. And we filed it in court in these 250 plus cases to try to make the judges aware that these requirements are there, and to help the defendants assert their legal rights. And so we just did that last week. And so it's trying to connect the actual federal enforcement, which did happen, and this company has to pay $24 million, $12 million to consumers and $12 million to the federal government. But where does the rubber hit the road in Washtenaw County for the actual people living here? So in other areas, we're currently investigating tip theft at restaurants. We've gotten multiple complaints about multiple different businesses about that, where the owner is just putting the money in their own pocket. And a flavor of that is where the manager is keeping the money as well. And then consumer protection in general, debt collection, which I mentioned, we have active investigations going on into the practices in addition to the notice of federal filing. Price gouging, tow trucks. It's another kind of area where there's power imbalances between somebody who's getting their car towed and then the business. And so it is has the potential for predatory practices in that area, including price gouging. So we've seen tow truck bills for over $10,000, which seems like a lot, but we'll see if the court agrees that that's price gouging. We've seen complaints about price gouging in hotels with power outage and kind of emergency situations. And then we're also looking into that with storage units as well. And so kind of a consistent theme with all of the things that we're looking at is there's some sort of built-in power imbalance and it's being exploited to extract money. And so construction contractor down payments, something we're looking into, health and safety of youth tobacco products. Foreclosure rescue operation, that's where people are in financial distress and then somebody comes in and offers some sort of product that allegedly will help them. But in fact, it can take all the equity they have in the house, if they have equity in the house, or take what money they do have, different things like that. These aren't new concepts, right? They've been around for a long time, particularly with the financial crisis, but there's different flavors, particularly if the home is above water as opposed to below water, that we're looking into. Middleman landlord that was re-renting properties, and then various illegal lease provisions. There's a lot of potential issues in the housing context. We're trying to work with as many partners as we can, trying to do it as smart as we can, and also get the word out. And so there's government partnerships and collaborations that we've had at the local, state, and federal level. Some of those are formally kind of recognized, like in the Department of Labor, the Memorandum of Understanding. Some of them are more informal, and some of them we're working toward. Various legal and human services organizations that we've already worked with or had consultations with, academic as well. And in particular with legal services and the U of M law school clinics, that's fairly robust because we've got clear overlap. They're representing the individual client. We're representing the county and the people as a whole. And so we can represent our respective interests in a collaborative fashion that can really help because we have different legal authority and interests. And so we can actually kind of leverage the work of the other organization to move forward. That's actually how, excuse me, how I met Prosecutor Savin in Detroit, because I was with Legal Services and he was with the city of Detroit, and we were working on lead hazards in housing. And so I was able to represent the individual to try to get the repairs, and they were able to represent the city to try to get all of the houses repaired. Partnerships and working relationships, consumer advocates, philanthropy, law enforcement, and labor. Labor is a particularly important partner because they are working for legal rights. I'm sorry, they're working to promote workers' rights, and that's not a legal solution. So sometimes things are wrong, but it's not against the law. And so that's something that we're not necessarily able to address. And then that's another backstop or a way to move forward with advocacy, particularly the Huron Valley Worker Rights and Organizing Center, which is a new organization that's trying to provide education awareness and do organizing of non-union workforces. So a couple weeks old, but as of our last review, these are the complaints that we had to date and the different subject areas. And so definitely common issues with consumer protection, housing, wage theft, and misclassification, worker rights in general. And then we've got a lot of ongoing investigations. We have quite a few that we provided legal information and referrals, and then could have been out of our geographic territory or a different legal authority or something along those lines. And then there were a few that we've resolved and some that we weren't able to connect with the person was the main issue with not moving forward. And so I will say, by the way, just going back to that, from my experience with legal services, that's actually a pretty low number of people who are not responsive to us. We've been pretty, we've had pretty good response rates. So the overall concept, we're building out the economic justice unit. We're building out the work. We're looking to work with as many people as collaboratively as we can. And then this is something that we can try to use to actually enforce the laws, to turn like the promise of our laws into live reality for the people in Washtenaw County. So that's our goal, and that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're working to accomplish. So happy to have as much or as little discussion. This is my first Barrier Busters meeting. Very happy to be here. I'm not exactly sure the format.
It's pretty casual, Todd. We can just open the floor for questions or comments.
I might have missed this at the beginning, but could you provide contact information or where how the referrals are received?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can put that in the chat.
Thank you.
And you know, it depends on the person. We've got the online form. I'm gonna put a link to our website in the chat. Got the online form, we got email form as well. I've gotten physical mail, you know, whatever works. And particularly if you're having somebody who's having difficulty connecting because of some kind of barrier, please do reach out to me directly. And I'll put this in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nathan, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. And also, thank you very much, Todd, for presenting. My question is, could you speak more about some of the work you've done around housing, specifically with landlords or support of tenants?
Yes.
Sorry,
And I'm just curious.
before I go,
Yeah.
I don't know if you noted, but the laughter is because that is something that we could definitely use support with. So I warn you, you
That
may
was
be
my
barraged
question.
with questions. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What organization are you with? I'm just curious.
I work with Michigan Medicine. I'm part of a team called Complex Care. So we work specifically with individuals who have a host of medical needs, and many of the
Yeah.
people that I serve specifically have these medical needs, have medical complexity, and are also unsheltered.
Yeah. So whole areas of kind of medical legal partnerships and addressing the underlying causes of health issues. So in terms of our work to date, like a concrete example would be, I got a complaint about some refugees from Afghanistan who were resettled in poor housing conditions. So they weren't complaining about it because either they didn't know or they didn't want to. And then that complaint came to me because of relationships and outreach that I had done with the private bar. And then I was able to connect them with the city of Ann Arbor's housing code enforcement and kind of work together. And basically I was the backstop for the work, and the situation got addressed. So the landlord actually both addressed the issue, and then the family actually voluntarily relocated because there was a better situation where they were going to be living closer to other people. So it wasn't a forced eviction or anything like that, but they chose to voluntarily relocate in addition to the house being fixed. So we were there as a potential affirmative litigation under the Consumer Protection Act, in addition to and separate from the city of Ann Arbor's enforcement. So that's going to be our primary area that we're looking into, is the Michigan Consumer Protection Act. So looking into illegal fees, illegal late fees, several $100s for late fees I've heard of. And that's something that we have heard through legal services, and then just need to get actually connected with the particular tenants and leases in those situations. This goes to, a lot of these times the cases present in a defensive posture with legal services. In particular, people tend to contact them when they're facing eviction, if they even reach out at that point. And so we're trying to get more information about that particular type of situation, but that's just an example. So with lead hazards, that was something that I worked on in Detroit, and that's definitely something that I'm looking to learn more about in Washtenaw County specifically. I'm much more familiar with Wayne County, but have had conversations with the health department and trying to learn the lay of the land here. That's definitely a situation we're interested in learning about, particularly if there's lead poisoning of children in a rental property. Generally speaking, that would be associated with lead-based paint. That's the most common, and that's something that the landlord should address. And then, in fact, there's potential criminal liability under the Michigan Lead Abatement Act if they do not address it within 90 days. Unfortunately, that's kind of a secondary prevention where the harm's already occurred, and then you're addressing it as opposed to kind of the primary prevention model in Detroit where you're supposed to repair the properties before you rent it. But we can at least do that. And so there's a wide variety of ways that we can be involved. We're also looking at the city of Ypsilanti has an ordinance regarding defense to payment of rent if the property doesn't have certificate of compliance, meaning they don't, have the authority from the city to rent the property. And so we are currently investigating whether there might be an appropriate advocacy opportunity in there. And so again, it's a unit of one, it's me. We've got some good legal authority and we can collaborate with legal services. We can provide legal information. We can point people toward other resources. We're not going to be doing the kind of direct tenant representation like legal services does. But we can do that kind of potentially broader scale strategic impact case regarding illegal lease terms or certificate of compliance or something in that area. But in general, I'm just interested in learning as much as I can about housing issues. And if it's outside of our wheelhouse, I'll let you know and then potentially try to help point you toward something else that can help. But just learning as much as I can, and I'll scratch my head and carefully consider it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. Yeah, I think something that you're going to hear from many of us are concerns with wrongful eviction.
Yeah.
Concerns with some of the things that you identified, like additional fees that would in fact be unlawful. So, and then I think you're also going to hear a lot about just intimidation of vulnerable individuals who are housed. So yeah, thank you again for being here.
Yeah.
Ambrose, you're
Ambrose, you're
muted.
muted.
Oh, did anyone have any additional questions or comments for Todd? All right, hearing none and seeing none. Todd, thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate the work you're doing. This is a great meeting to be involved in for all these kind of concerns. So we'd love to see you again next month and in the future. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you are so welcome. All right. Sarah, I have your presentation pulled up already. I'll share that and then you guys take as much time as you need to get ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sarah Russman. I'm going to start out the presentation and then my colleague Sarah will be taking over. I'm going to start off by just a quick overview of what JFS services are at the current moment. And then we'll dive into a new program that we are offering to the community called Decisions for Dignity. And that is highlighting helping folks access advanced care planning directives. And then we will move into our CARES program that Sarah will highlight for all of us. So next slide, please. Thank you, Ambrose. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem.
Our mission is Jewish Family Services of Washtenaw County is to create solutions, promote dignity, and inspire humanity. Next slide. And right now we're currently offering transportation services, resettlement, international, employment and economic counseling, Thrive counseling, nutrition services, community assistance, and then Sarah and I will talk about specifically WISE and CARES. So WISE stands for Washtenaw Integrated Senior Experience, and there's several areas that we work on it encompass this little arm of our agency here. It's WISE Safety Net, Cares, Wise Choice, Fee for Service, Senior Care Management, Wise at the J, and that's luncheon, socialization, and activities. We also offer comfort calls. We have a group of great volunteers that keep our aged population connected. Aging solo group, bereavement group at TBE, that's Temple Beth. New American Club, congregation-based social work, technology assistance program, and Decisions for Dignity that I am just starting to roll out into the community. And then at the very end, the very last slide of our presentation, there's a list of JOT forms, and I believe that all of you probably got it in the email. So if you just click on that link, you can, if you have interest or have any clients or people in the community that you'd like to refer that think would be interested, you can send them our way. Next slide. So Decisions for Dignity is, you all can read, is a program that we started because during COVID, I would be doing intakes with our clients, and our client base is 60 and over. And one of the questions in the inventory is basically, do you have advanced care directives? And 9 times out of 10, folks would always say, you know, no, but I should really do that as an afterthought. So it's an attempt to fill a need in the community that's kind of going under the radar, unmet. I know that there's a lot of times you can get them from your doctor's office or have them done in a medical facility, or if you have a lawyer or an estate planner or something like that, you can have them done, but a lot of folks don't have access, or there's barriers to those types of services. So what I'm really trying to do is reach marginalized communities in Washtenaw County, marginalized populations in our community. So yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. Decisions for Dignity is just basically helping folks use a tool that we're called 5 Wishes. And we're just going to set up appointments and go through these objectives in the booklet. And then at the end, hopefully we will have relieved some of their anxiety and existential dread. Next slide. So while I was going through the process of training for advanced care planning, I also took a course in our community from the dying year and became an end-of-life doula. So I think that really it was a natural next step for me to continue working with folks that are of the age population in our community. And it's something that I have a passion for. So, so yeah, doulas are just folks that can come in and help you where you're at with the process. And we assist with emotional, social, spiritual care, and logistic and practical assistance, such as working on the 5 Wishes. Next slide. Oh, that's just a continuation. And then, so preparing for end of life, eventually what I would like to do in this fall, and you can keep an eye out for it, is that we'll be having a 4-part series where we go in a little bit deeper on the emotional, physical, spiritual, and practical aspects of end of life and helping people prepare for those. Yep. So face-to-face appointments are something that we're offering because we really want to meet people where they're at, and it's a free service. So if it means coming to your home to do a visit there, or having you meet with us in the office or a neutral space such as, you know, a library or a coffee shop, that's something that we're willing to do. However, if you are interested in having it be a durable document, then we would have to have witnesses, and we do have options for having it notarized so that this can become a complete package for you to keep in your paperwork in your home should an emergency arise. And so that's where we're talking about the important documents folder to keep handy. A lot of people keep them on the fridge or just somewhere accessible. Next slide. And then we'll also be hosting some special interest sessions coming up too. regarding funeral planning and topics that are just really interesting to folks, like eco-friendly burials, medical assistance in dying, considerations for the queer community, hospice. And if you have any extra ideas that you want more information on, I'm always happy to kick around new ideas. So feel free to reach out to me. My information is on the last slide. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You did a fantastic job, and her program sounds wonderful from everything I've heard about it. So I'm very happy that it's happening. So CARES is our program to support people who are caring for older adults. And we're very closely intertwined with the rest of the WISE program because obviously a caregiver caring for an older adult, both the caregiver and the person they're caring for are likely to need services. But in CARES, we focus on meeting the caregiver where they are and whatever needs they have. General criteria for qualifying for the program are to be caring for someone 60 or older. Now, caring can look very different for every caregiver. Could be caring for a parent, grandparent, spouse, other family member. Sometimes we have clients who are caring for a friend or a neighbor. Sometimes they live with the person they're caring for. Sometimes they're a caregiver from out of state. Long distance caregiving is very much a thing. The only requirement in terms of location is that the care recipient needs to live in Washtenaw County. And that's because many of our specific services that we offer are location bound. Although we do have a few services I'll get to later that are virtual. And so we've had some caregivers from Wayne County participate. Slide, thank you. Yeah, so general services that we offer, I think I had in the last slide, CARES stands for Caregiver Assessment, Respite, Education, and Support. And breaking that down a little, every new caregiver participating in the program, we do an assessment, which involves asking different questions about different areas of strain they might be under. And that's helpful both for us to get a picture of where they might need more support, but also for the caregivers themselves. I've spoken to multiple clients who would be like, oh, wow, until you asked me those questions, it didn't really occur to me that this is an area I'm struggling and I need support in. So the assessment is helpful for both us and the caregivers, and then we do reassessments at 3 months and 6 months to check in on how things are going. General services we offer, I have listed here, case management, which can look very different depending on what kind of case management the person needs. One of our most popular services is that we have funding to provide free respite care for caregivers, and that would be a professional caregiver coming out to the home of the care recipient to provide sometimes more in-depth personal attendance. Sometimes someone just needs companionship. And we have a partnership with HomeWatch caregivers to provide that. We're able currently to offer up to 50 hours of that free care for the year, although that's always dependent on how much funding we have. But at the moment, it's 50 hours. And then in addition to the respite care, we do educational programs, usually about 4 per year. Last couple that we did, we had a lawyer come in to give a presentation on issues related to caregiving and aging. We had a presentation on memory loss and how to distinguish between normal changes that can come with aging versus, could it be a sign of dementia or something else? And we also, our programs are based on what the caregivers we work with are asking for. So, we do a call every so often. What do you want to learn about? What are the questions that you're wondering about? And so if anyone in the community, whether you're personally a caregiver or you work with caregivers, if there are areas that you feel like there's room for more education, you can feel free to let us know. Or if you have an area of expertise and you want to partner and do a presentation, reach out. Either way. All right, we've got can you go back a little to the slide? I think there's a couple more points to cover there. Yeah, so we've covered the C and the A and the R and the E. The S is for supports. we have support groups on Zoom once a month. Currently, we have 2. One is a general support group for anyone caring for someone over 60. And then the other is a newer group we started this year, spousal support groups for people who are caring for a spouse, partner, significant other. And when we get to the end of the slide, there's a registration link, which I think was sent out to the list, so you should all have access to that. But that's open to anyone. They don't have to participate in other CARES services. Some people in the support group are full CARES clients, others just sign up for the group, and both are welcome. And then kind of the last thing on this slide is the phone tree, which is adjacent to the support groups, but it's a peer support network. Caregivers agree to share their phone numbers on a list, and then all caregivers participating in the phone tree have access to that contact list and are able to reach out directly to each other if they want some connection or support outside of the scheduled meetings. Currently, we have, I think, 11 caregivers on that list, but we sometimes have new people joining, and that's again open to any caregiver in CARES. I see a link in the chat. Can the current speaker please provide us with the web link to respite services? Yeah, so I'll get to that a little later, but basically in order to sign up for the respite services, the client or you on behalf of the client would reach out to the JFS main office, and I think there's contact information on a later slide, and then express that you're interested in the CARES program and respite. And then our CARES manager, Roberta Hirschon, does an intake assessment and completes the referral connection or the referral for respite. Yeah, good question. And I think we're ready for the next slide now. Thank you, Ambrose. Additional CARES services, we have Text Talks, which is a text line we use to send out information about resources for caregivers and older adults, programming that's happening in the community. Definitely, there have been more than one thing that someone sent out to the Barrier Busters list, and so I was like, oh, that's good for caregivers, and put it in there. So that's relevant both because if you either know caregivers who are interested in getting on the list or interested yourself, or you have something you want to share, you can always reach out to me or to Roberta Hirschon, and we'll get that information in there. Text Talks is another of our services that's open, even if they don't want to go through the full intake process. They can just sign up for the texts, and that's totally fine. The other services I have here, caregiver consultations, are specialty counseling program, which is, like any counseling, it can be tailored to the individual based on what needs they have and what they want to work on, but it's specialized for caregivers. That service, it is billed similar to our Thrive Counseling, but it can be insurance reimbursable. So again, reach out if anyone is interested in that. Most of our services are free. Our other currently feed program is Wise Choice, which Sarah mentioned briefly at the beginning, but that's more in-depth geriatric care management for caregivers or the person they're caring for who needs more involved support. That one is currently $110 per hour, so not accessible for everyone, but it's an option. And I know there's been some talk of trying to develop a sliding scale system for that. I don't know exactly where that is right now. But it's possible that may shift in the future. Let's see, I'm going through these pretty fast, so do feel free to post in the chat if you have any other questions. I see Savannah shared the JFS website, so thank you. We're starting a new program through CARES, which we're calling Sharing Your Story, which is an opportunity for caregivers who want to talk about their journey, what they've experienced, what they've learned, and that the format for sharing the story can depend on what the caregiver is comfortable with. They could, record a video talking about it, or we could help them with writing an article about what they've experienced. So that's, again, open to caregivers who want to share. And then the other things that we do are, generally, we can link to other programs at JFS, transportation, food pantry I have listed here. We also have our tech help program, which several caregivers have been interested in. Our wonderful end-of-life doula and her end-of-life programming. And then general resource advocacy, which, I'm sure we have shared clients with a number of you because people have complicated situations and needs in multiple areas. So we try to be a source for caregivers to find out what we can provide, but also to help connect them to things that we aren't able to provide directly. And that is, I think, the last point I had for the CARES services. This is just contact information. If you want to contact for any of the specific programming, we have Sarah Russman here, and then Roberta, I mentioned, she runs the CARES program, although you can also, I can put my contact information in the chat as well if someone wants to reach out to me directly. And that's our presentation. I'll look in the chat and see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, feel free to ask.
All right, hearing none and seeing none, I want to thank both Sarah and Sarah. I really appreciate you putting up with me today. But we always really appreciate JFS. You guys do so many things out in the community, and you're such a great partner to have. Really appreciate you guys coming out today. Katie, whenever you are ready, you can either present or I can present, whichever you think might be easier for you.
I have my presentation because I updated it a little bit.
Go for it.
Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. All right, so my name is Katie. I am the Women and Family Outreach Coordinator for Home of New Vision. And we'll get into a little bit about what Home of New Vision is. So Home of New Vision is a nonprofit that provides substance use disorder treatment as well as mental health services in Washtenaw County. We provide gender-specific care, so we're able to provide certain services for those that are mothers or parents in recovery. I'll get a little bit more into that. And we are also really happy to promote that we are accepting of all different pathways when it comes to recovery. And for those that don't work in substance use disorder, what I mean is that we don't subscribe to only Alcoholics Anonymous or Smart Recovery or any of those types of things. We're really person-centered and client-centered. And so we kind of follow whatever works best for our clients. And so anyone that is interested in recovery can come and seek our services in Washtenaw County. So this is just a little brief overview of the things that I'll touch on today. So our clinical substance use disorder services, our women's specialty program, our mental health services, our recovery housing, our engagement center, our quick response team, and our recovery community organization. I'm going to try to go through this fast to respect everybody's time and allow for questions. So feel free to let me know if I'm going a little too fast. So to start off with our clinical services, we have our short-term residential facility here in Ann Arbor. Residential is a 28-day stay program for those in recovery that are looking, that are assessed at this level of care of needing to be in a residential program. And so we really try and provide a supportive and structured environment for those early days in recovery. They get to access peer recovery coaches, therapists, case management. They also go out into the community and go to some local meetings, like AA meetings and such. And this is just a picture of the back of it is a house that we have a residential facility in, and that's what this picture is of. And then for our outpatient services, those are housed in Ann Arbor as well, off of Professional Drive. We're at Washtenaw and Huron Parkway. And our outpatient services are provided to those with substance use disorder, and we also have just a mental health bit. But mainly what we do here is intake and assessment, engagement and early intervention services, sustained recovery activities, get them in the recovery community. case management services, peer recovery coaching, and then as well, a lot of our clients and a lot of people in this population have co-occurring mental health concerns. And so we do work with those people for the co-occurring disorder treatment through therapeutic interventions, psychiatric services, and medication management. We do have a psychiatrist that is, we have 2 on staff. One is completely virtual, and then the other one is in 1 day a week. And then a little bit more about our outpatient program. So this is something that's really special to Home of New Vision. We have a women's specialty program. We are the only substance use disorder treatment provider in the county that has this program. We have specific funding for it. And it is a program aimed at those who are pregnant or parenting and going through substance use disorder recovery journey. So this program has kind of enhanced services, allowing for people to receive childcare when they come in for their therapy appointments, so that we, break down that barrier for them, helping them access transportation, whether that is working with us to get bus tokens or figuring out how to get their driver's license and things like that. We also have some additional services on top of therapy and medication management, such as our peer recovery coaching is specifically geared toward parents in recovery. Our peer recovery coach on this team is a mother in recovery herself, so she shares a lot of those experiences. Our case management as well is a little bit heightened, so especially for those that are pregnant up to a year postpartum or have experienced a miscarriage or elected to terminate a pregnancy. Those clients kind of are enhanced is the word that we use. And so case management is kind of ramped up. We have the ability to go to appointments like prenatal appointments and stuff like that with our clients to just be that extra support and help them advocate for themselves. And then one other thing that we do is host community and client-centered events to kind of promote recovery and to let people know what we're doing in the community. And then something new that we have added to our agency in the last year is mental health services for those that are not experiencing substance use disorder. So people that are looking for therapy outside of substance use disorder. So this service is for those with mild to moderate mental health concerns, and we take Medicaid and Medicare as well. We also have a host of private insurances that we take in addition to those. We also are able to provide mental health services to youth and adolescents. So basically anyone over the age of 6 can receive therapeutic services from us. And some of the areas that we focus on with the adolescents is education and the effects of alcohol and drug use, anger and stress management, developing healthy relationships, things like that. And our clinical therapist actually specializes in play therapy. So that's something that we're really trying to use with our youth and adolescents to kind of work through some of those issues. So this is a little bit about referring to us. And so this is kind of a broad map of how, if you have a client that is looking for services for specifically substance use disorder in Washtenaw County, kind of a little flow chart to be able to see, what are the steps and how can I help them get into services. So basically, if clients are uninsured, not sure if they're insured or have Medicaid coverage, they have to go through Washtenaw Access. Which is basically, it's through CMH and it's a phone line, and they have to do like an assessment to assess their level of care. This is the place where they can request specific services or request specific providers that they want. This is kind of an intimidating thing we find with a lot of our clients. So if you ever have someone that is interested in making the step but doesn't want to do it alone, we are totally able to help them with that process. And if you want to reach out, we're more than happy to help them do that. And then those with Medicaid or Medicare or private coverage, it's more going to your provider, figuring out, what is covered and what's not covered, or calling us and see if your private insurance is covered by us. And then in addition, so these are some forms that we've put together to kind of help people make that referral, that direct referral to us. So we are able to contact your clients if we have a release of information on file. That's what this document is here. And I am happy to pre-fill these for different agencies if you are looking to have, your client speak to us about services, I can pre-fill this for you, and so that you can just have it on hand to be able to provide to clients. This one is more of a specific about referring to certain services, and you can fax that over to us. We do need to have the release of information to be able to contact the clients. And this referral form does say that it is women's specialty specific. We will not turn anybody away who's not eligible for those services. We'll still get them connected. But if anyone or any agency is interested in these forms, you can feel free to contact me, and my information will be on the last slide. I see we have a question in the chat. You provide outpatient drug treatment for SUD client that can accommodate their dialysis schedule. I am not sure on that one. It probably depends on what their dialysis schedule looks like. And they would probably have to consult with the physician on that. I don't think I have a solid answer to that question. I'm sorry, John. So moving on, we also have recovery housing here in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. So we have 4 different houses in the communities, and we have 2 houses that are for medically assisted treatment. So those that are on Sublocade or Suboxone or Vivitrol, one of those medications to help with their recovery. And then we also have 2 traditional houses, which is where there's no medication assisted treatment involved. And we have, they are segregated by gender. So we have 2 men's houses and 2 women's houses. And these are really just kind of more structured living environments for people that are in recovery and looking to be around other people that are in recovery. All right, and then we also have our engagement centers. So we do have one out in Jackson, but that's not really pertinent to this conversation. We have our Ypsilanti Engagement Center, which is on our net. So it's right over by the Michigan Health Department and the Ypsi Packard Health. The Engagement Center is more of a short-term crisis intervention facility that provides a supervised setting for those who have used within the last 24 hours and are looking for a place to get connected to resources and to start their recovery journey. So they have beds, they have place for laundry, showers, things like that to just kind of get ready to make that next step. And yeah, so that's what this is. And it's supposed to be kind of an alternative to the emergency room for those that don't need that level of care. And then getting into a little bit more of some of our other programs, we have our Washtenaw Recovery Advocacy Project, which is our recovery community organization out here in Washtenaw. So they do a lot of advocacy at the local and state level, as well as they do a lot of events to support recovery in the community. So they have their annual walk, which is what this picture is from, which should be happening next month. I'm not exactly sure on the date. But they do events all the time. Like they'll be starting their movie nights in the park. Every week we have art and recovery, yoga, basketball, different things to get people involved. And they have their own website. So if you're interested in checking that out, therap.org is where that can be found. And we just opened this past weekend our Community Resource Center in Ypsilanti. So it's off of Ecorse Road. So this is kind of where a lot of the people that work in our RAP program and a lot of our peer recovery coaches will be working. It is an open center, so it's not really like a crisis center like the engagement center is, but it's more of just learning about recovery resources, a place to hang out and talk with a recovery coach, and just kind of more of a communal space. And we're really excited about this opening. It is open like during business hours, like 9 to 5 or 9 to 4:30, I believe, 9 to 4:30 throughout the week. And yep, that one is over on Ecorse Road. And then this is our quick response team. So the Recovery Opiate Overdose Team, ROOT, is a quick response team in Washtenaw County that engages survivors of overdose, of opiate overdose specifically in the emergency department and in the community. So they get a call either from the line directly or they get connected. They have a partnership with HBA. So whenever Narcan is used, they get information about the patient and stuff like that to try to get them connected to recovery supports in the community. And they are also able to provide support for those affected by it, like their loved ones as well. One other thing that Root works on is getting harm reduction supplies out into the community. And so we're really proud to say within the last year, we've gotten a ton of naloxone out in the community. And we have multiple free distribution sites throughout the community. So I think we now have a vending machine or a distribution box. The vending machine is free. You just have to punch in the numbers. And our distribution boxes are like refurbished newspaper boxes that don't require a coin slot or anything. But they have fentanyl testing strips in them, xylazine testing strips, as well as Narcan in these vending machines and distribution boxes. And you can see they're listed here. I think we have one, at least one of them at all of the libraries in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor currently. And that's about it for my brief run through of the programs that we do here at Home of New Vision. This is my contact information, and then this is just our general office number. So thank you so much for the time. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Katie,
Hi.
it's Lisa from Catholic Social Services. Great
Yeah, hi.
presentation. Just to clarify about the new mental health services, did I understand to say that you guys are taking Medicare for that as well?
Yeah, we should be taking Medicare and Medicaid for those as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
And thank you, Ambrose, for putting in our website in the chat.
Yeah, you're welcome. I actually had a question myself. Are you guys providing family therapy?
I don't know if we do like family therapy in the sense where they all go see the same therapist. I know that we are able to see children 6 and up.
Okay,
that is
that was
something that I
more
would
my
have-
question.
Yeah, I do know that one of our therapists is a licensed marriage and family counselor, but I don't know how those sessions work. I think typically we do have a lot of clients that bring their children, but they typically see a different therapist.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much. And if you have any questions or interested in any of those referral documents, feel free to shoot me an email or, just call Home and New Vision and ask for Katie. So thank you.